Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We will give it a minute here for everybody to get signed in, and then we will start our nutrient management update. All right, so it looks like most people are in, but we still have a couple trickling in. So thank you all so much for joining us for the 2022 nutrient management update. But even though we're in 2023, we're going to talk about our 2022 numbers. So to start us off for the day, we're going to have Cody Calkins with the Department of Agriculture, Trade and Consumer Protection share our update for our 2022 numbers. Then we are going to turn it over to Mike Stanek, the NRCS state agronomist, to share updates from NRCS regarding nutrient management. And then from there, we are going to turn it over to Jamie Patton to talk a little bit about social barriers and moving past our 35% coverage of nutrient management acres. And then we will do a wrap up at the end on nutrient management tips and tricks within SnapPlus and best management practices when planning our nutrient management plans out. So with that, I will turn it over to Cody Calkins to talk about our 2022 numbers.
All right, thanks, Andrea. Let me get this shared here. And let me know when you're able to see
that. It looks good. It just needs to be beautiful.
Okay. All right, thanks, Andrea, for the introduction. Like she said, I'm Cody Calkins. I'm the Nutrient Management Policy and Standards Specialist here at DATCP. I'm going to go over a brief review of this year's or last year's numbers. I'm going to cover the Nutrient Management Regional Workshops coming up later this year. We'll go over some SnapPlus data layers and some commonly requested layers that are now available for you to download. We'll go over the Slow-Right Bedrock Performance Standard and NMFE self-paced trainings. So to begin, last year I made quite a significant change to how we collect and request data from the counties for nutrient management updates. In the past, they would be sent to DATCP in an Excel spreadsheet from all of the counties. This last year, we switched to a more survey style format with an assistant spreadsheet that calculated that data for you. So you could just plug your numbers from your spreadsheet or program you're using into that assistant. Calculate the numbers for you, so you can just plug them into the survey and then do that relatively quickly. On average, the survey only took people maybe 15 minutes on average to complete. So, and so far I've heard no significant problems with switching over to this format. There was some confusion though in this last year where people were submitting their Department of Revenue or spreadsheets for the Farmland Preservation Program. Those still need to go to the DATCP, but they go to the planning and ordinance section with Katie Smith. So otherwise, I no longer need those annual spreadsheets. Instead, we'll be switching to this, keep maintaining the survey that will allow us to ask different questions and kind of gauge the interest and other issues that counties are having locally in a quicker fashion, so we can address some of those issues as they come up. So last year, the nutrient management update, here are the numbers for last year. We are up a little bit over previous years, a couple percent. We're still kind of at a plateau, but overall we had about 37.3% of the state's harvested cropland acres covered by nutrient management. One thing to note too is that NASS is supposed to release the state cropland numbers again this year with the survey. So we don't know if that's going to change going forward or how much, but In this last year, we had about 9.3 million acres of harvested cropland in the state, and we had about just shy of 3.5 million acres of nutrient management covering those acres. So,
Cody, I'm gonna stop you. Your microphone is kind of cutting in and out. I'm not sure if you need to move closer to your computer, if that would help.
sure, let me just scoot in a little bit. Let me know if it keeps doing that. I might have to switch to a headset. But otherwise, for nutrient management plan distribution, one thing that is slightly different again this year, in the past, a lot of counties would select a primary purpose for a nutrient management plan, or DATCP would select one for them for how a nutrient management, what their primary purpose was for that plan. This last year, the survey system didn't allow for that to happen. So we were discussing, it was relatively interesting to see why a nutrient management plan is written. It can be for any number of purposes or number of programs. So by and large, the bulk of nutrient management plans that are submitted to the counties and then reported to get DATCP, the bulk of those, 90% of those, are for DATCP purposes like farmland preservation, NMFE, or other cost share. About 30% of those were submitted to the county for county purposes, like citing, zoning, other local ordinances and regulations. About 8% of those plans overall were submitted to the county, were tracked by the county as being for DNR purposes, maybe for cost share or for KFOs, etc. Otherwise, acreage distribution, a little over half of the acres are covered by DATCP programs, 30% for DNR county programs, and then NRCS and other about 6%. And then for who wrote the plans this last year, still about the same going forward. There isn't a significant change in whether a professional like a CCA wrote the plan or whether it was farmer written. It's still about the same split. About 20% of the plans were written by farmers, and then about 78% of those were written by professionals. This slide is really here for any counties that want to take a quick look at their numbers before we actually publish the report in the next couple of weeks. So if you have any questions about your numbers, remember you did submit them via the survey. So if you need any changes to those numbers before I publish the actual report, please do reach out. I've had a couple of counties reach out already the last couple of weeks. Have had to make some changes to their numbers just because every year we do get a couple farms at the end of the year that submit their numbers late or their plans late, and we do need to make some changes to the maps before they come out. So just for your consideration, take a look. If you have any questions, reach out. But going forward, these numbers will primarily be coming from you at the county level through the survey. Another big thing this year that we wanted to take a look at was tracking and reporting of the nutrient management plans. So first, we are looking at what kind of methods are you using locally to track your nutrient management plans. By and large, the bulk of counties are using Microsoft Excel for tracking. Simple spreadsheet, very powerful use. Most of the counties are using some kind of Excel or a combination of Excel and GIS, either through ArcMap or through Transcendent. So it's just interesting to take a look at what kind of methods you're using locally to track. And if there are any, time-saving methods you would like to share with us, let us know. This has been a pretty, it's gonna be kind of difficult because if you have a lot of participants in programs or just have a lot of people to track, just reach out to us. We can help you out with that. Again, one of the other questions we asked was at what intervals or plans or checklists submitted. By and large, most plans and checklists are submitted to the counties annually. It's a little bit less. About half of the plans are submitted annually versus about 77% of the checklists are submitted annually or some variation thereof. So just another kind of different look at what the counties are requesting and dealing with locally. Not every county has the same level of staffing, funding, and time to take on the bulk of these plans. So it's just interesting to take a look at that. Moving on to the regional nutrient management workshops. These will be going on later this year. We'll be taking a look at, we'll be hosting these in Eau Claire, Wausau, and Oshkosh the week of August 28th through September 1st. And in southern Wisconsin, we'll be hosting them in Darlington and Jefferson that first week of September from the 4th to the 8th. If you have, we'll be sending out, working with Andrea to get a actual document out, more information as that comes up. So this will be to go over any kind of similar to today's update, but in more depth. Another thing that's been very commonly requested this last year, particularly from some county staff and a lot of CCAs, is access to the data layers that are available in SnapPlus. We worked with our IT department here at DATCP to make those GIS layers available. There's a couple of different ways that you can download that data on our open data portal. You can either download it at the specific county level, or you can download it for statewide. And then the DATCP Land and Water Management, that has other data related to like environmental preservation and some of our other programs if you're interested in that data. Do note though that a lot of these updates only really occur on an annual basis. So towards the end of the year, maybe like October, November, that's when those layers may be updated. So if you're working with anyone that does download this information out of SnapPlus for their own purposes, for writing plans or their own use, they should be aware that this data does get updated about on an annual basis, just so they don't fall behind. Moving on to the AdCap 50 revision. So as a lot of you are aware of, is we are making changes to our administrative code AdCap 50. The primary purpose for this revision is to facilitate the implementation of the Solar and Bedrock Performance Standard, update and add conservation practice and other technical standards like DATCP 01 for how to measure depth of bedrock. We're also adding a process for technical standard development, as well as documentation requirements for user management planning. So if you would like any additional information regarding this process or would like to participate, you can visit the website below. And the only other recent update is that our economic assessment has been released on our website, so you can go take a look at that. The next update, we'll be sending the draft of the revision to the DATCP board in May. And then after that is reviewed, then we'll go into like the public comment period. Like I mentioned, one of the biggest changes is that we're looking at incorporating the Solar and Bedrock Performance Standard. For just a quick reminder, this was adopted by the DNR in 2018. Some counties have already adopted some of this locally. It is a targeted performance standard, and it only applies in areas with depths of less than 20 feet of soil or consolidated materials to that Silurian bedrock. So that really only applies in those counties, the eastern side of the state along Lake Michigan. Our revision to AdCap 50 is looking at adding this to farm conservation practices, like our nutrient management planning requirements. We're looking at establishing the steps for implementation of this performance standard. And then we're also looking at identifying and adding tools to help the counties and producers meet that performance standard. Another big thing that's coming later this year is the solar and depth of bedrock mapping effort that the Wisconsin Geologic Natural History Survey has been working on. Last year, or the last couple of years, has been a lot of data collection. One of the big ones was the aerial electromagnetic survey that occurred up in the Northeast. So over the course of the next year, they are looking at adding additional data, doing some ground truthing in the field, putting together workshops, and doing other internal and external reviews of that data. So if you'd like to participate in any of that kind of stuff, primarily in those counties on the east side, you can reach out to David Hart and his crew over at WGHS. We hope to have that map by the end of the year so that we can start looking at what is the process going to be for getting that into SnapPlus and SnapMaps for use. And then the last thing I'd like to cover quick, the UW did put together a nutrient management self-paced education program. Topics include, all the normal stuff that you need to know about for nutrient management, soil basics, other nutrient basics, mineral management, and SnapPlus basics. It is available online. It's mobile friendly and desktop friendly. And this is important. It may be completed in lieu of attending an in-person training, assuming that the participant submits their course checklist to their local county land and water conservation department, and their first nutrient management plan is approved by a credential reviewer. So if they don't have the time to attend an in-person class or go to one of the county trainings, they can do this, the self-paced course, fill out the checklist, get their plan reviewed, and then they're assumed to be an approved plan writer for themselves, and only themselves if they go through this process, just like our normal DATCP approved training courses. This is really only for landowners that wish to write their plans themselves. And if you have any questions for Andrea or I will take them at the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Cody. We will turn it over to Mike. Mike, just to make sure you're not talking, are you? You're super quiet. Barely can hear you. Why don't we turn it over to Jamie while Mike is figuring out his microphone, and we will talk a little bit about moving past 35% coverage.
Perfect.
37.3.
You betcha. Let me, is this showing up correctly now?
Beautiful.
Awesome. So yeah, that's where exciting news this morning. So I didn't get time to change the slide. So yesterday I thought we were at 35% coverage by nutrient management plans. Today we're talking 37.3. So always a good day when we're seeing more nutrient management plans covering more acres out there on the landscape. So my name is Jamie Patton. I'm an outreach specialist with the Nutrient and Pest Management Program. And this was actually a poster that my NPM colleagues as well as my DATCP colleagues presented at the most recent phosphorus conference. And so it gives us a perspective of what is actually going out there in the landscape, because what we did is we dove into the scientific literature, the social science scientific literature, to figure out, why do people adopt NMPs? Why do they not? And how can we use that information to change our messaging, change our education to get more cropland under nutrient management plans? So Cody gave us a great overview. I'm just going to show you the old data, the 2021 data. We have fairly stagnant numbers in nutrient management plans, so hovering around that 35, 37%. What we'd really like to see is to get close. We know we're never going to get 100%, but can we get closer to that 50%? Can we get closer to 75%? And so how do we get there? And I just wanted to show, and Cody didn't show this slide, is the NMP distribution. And so about 3% of our nutrient management plans that are submitted are voluntary. So how do we work on increasing that number across the state? Getting people to realize the value of a nutrient management plan, how it can help them plan their nutrient additions, how it can help them save money, how it can help them protect environmental quality. So what we're focusing on today is that voluntary precipitation. So it is snowing, but voluntary participation out there on the landscape. So what did the literature tell us? So if you're interested, I'm really happy to send you my literature reference list, but otherwise, most of the studies we found are focused on the theory of planned behavior. So looking at what causes people to intend to change their behavior and then actually implement that behavior. So we looked at studies from not only Wisconsin, but across the United States and Europe, and particularly Ireland and Northern Ireland are really keen on studying what causes people to implement nutrient management plans. But the theory of planned behavior is fairly straightforward. It's fairly simple. It looks at three factors that influence behavior: attitude of the individual, whether or not social norms are impacting that person's, are forcing that person or encouraging that person to change their behavior, as well as a perception of the ease of adaptability. Is changing my behavior going to be easy? Do I have the skills and the knowledge to do it? So let's look at each one of these three factors individually. So when we dive into the nutrient management literature, personal attitude, and I split them up into three basic categories. You'll see they're green, orange, and blue. Green is that person's individual personal thought process. You know, am I responsible for maintaining the environment? Will my actions, do I believe my actions will actually benefit water quality? And also, will my actions help to reduce regulation? And we hear this a lot when we talk about farmer-led watersheds, right? If I change my practices, if I can make improvements in environmental quality on my own voluntarily, will we see less regulation overall? So those ingrained personal attitudes are really important. I highlighted also positive economic outcomes. So when we look at all of the studies, people are more, and it makes sense, right? People are more conducive to implementing a nutrient management plan if they think they're going to have a benefit from it, and in particular, an economic benefit. Are we going to preserve yields while reducing the amount of input? Am I going to increase my yields? So on or so forth. Overall, do I see a positive outcome? And it's also impacted by social connections. So do I feel a connection to other nutrient management adopters? I always think about when we do nutrient management plans in Shawano County. So I've been helping with those for almost 10 years now, and they're like their own little social group. We come in, we drink coffee, we eat donuts. It's always the same folks. We always do nutrient management planning together. You know, they have that connection. They share information. I tried this worked, I tried this, it didn't work, so on or so forth. But really building that cohort group of adopters, as well as looking engagement in industry networks. And when I think about that industry network, how can we leverage our producer-led watersheds? How can we leverage our demonstration farm networks to help us change our attitude towards nutrient management planning and increase the voluntary adoption of those plans? So there's also social pressure. So we have that overall personal attitude, but are we seeing influences from the outside? So is there a local social pressure to follow a nutrient management plan? And I'm not talking regulation, right? Regulation or farmland preservation tax line credits, but really looking at, do I feel that pressure from outside? Are my neighbors watching me? Do they see if I have a nutrient management plan? Are they watching my applications? And that's fairly common up here in the Northeast. Are they counting loads, so on or so forth? Do I have that pressure, and do I feel that need to have that nutrient management plan? So that's more of a negative connotation when it comes to social pressure, but there's also a lot of positivity. And that's where I like to focus, because that's where I think we can have some change. Are these folks getting positive encouragement from respected individuals? And that's why we're talking with you all today. Who are those respected individuals? When we look at the research, it's not necessarily those coming from the university or those coming from a regulatory standpoint. That positive encouragement is coming from those people that they respect. Is it coming from their conservation professionals that they work with on an everyday basis? So that those land conservation folks, those NRCS folks, is it their technical service providers? Is it their agronomists? Those are the respected individuals that we're talking about. And can we talk with folks in a way to positively encourage them to adopt that nutrient management plan? It's also impacted by positive popular press. So this is one that we don't oftentimes think of. You know, we don't open up the farm magazine and see those really glowing newspaper articles or magazine articles on what a nutrient management plan is and why it's important, but maybe we should. And so what impact would that positive popular press, not only in those traditional outlets, such as magazines, newspapers, radio, but also really utilizing social media to provide those tidbits of reminders and point out the science behind a nutrient management plan, those economic benefits, those social and environmental benefits of a nutrient management plan. And then last but not least, when we look at that theory of planned behavior, it's the ease of adopting that behavior. No one wants to do anything that's going to be hard. We don't want to do things that scare us, that we don't think we have the knowledge, skills, and abilities to do. So how do we change our nutrient management plan so that we have this perception that everyone can do it? And so Cody alluded to the online nutrient management plan. So how do we get out there and we provide people with the skills and the interest and the ability not only to write their plan, but to implement their plan? And why this is so important is we found in the research that if people think they have control over their behavior, in particular, if people think they have control over their nutrient management content, right, they're going to be more likely to adopt. And that's what a nutrient management plan is about, right? Us putting our nutrient management plans into a software system, onto paper, depending upon who we are, and really making sure that we're accounting for those nutrients that we are producing on farm and minimizing the amount of nutrient from off farm that we have to bring in, improving farm sustainability. So all of these ways, when we think about ease of behavior, is a lot of educational intervention, whether it be formal educational intervention through our nutrient management plans, through webinars such as this, but it also can include that one-on-one education, that one-on-one conversation and support that we can provide as conservation professionals to those farmers who are interested in writing their plan as well as implementing their plan. So that's the basics of a theory of planned behavior, right? Do we have the attitudes? Do we have those social pressures? And do we have that perception that it's going to be easy and important for us to change our behavior? So lastly, but not least, how do we move forward? How do we take this information and provide collective action? And this was our talk today. So Andrea asked me to share these results because it really does take a village to raise a child, and it takes a village to increase moving nutrient management plans across 35%. We need to target that 3% of voluntary plan writing and see if we can get that to 5%, 7%, 10%, right? How many more nutrient management plans can we get out there through positive interactions from respected individuals? And you, the folks that I'm talking to on the webinar today, are those high impact and impact individuals. How do we put interventions out there on the landscape? So just thinking ahead and being proactive, I have no prescriptive or no identified way forward. This is just to get you thinking on this bright and sunny and snowy Monday morning, how we can collectively move together to improve nutrient management in Wisconsin. So is that a change in the way in which we do internal training? So things like this, do we need more internal training for those land conservation professionals through those nutrient management planners where we can share our information and our strategies, share that scientific knowledge, share that technical as well as applied knowledge so that we all together become better nutrient management planners and we become better at communicating that information to our clientele. How do we incorporate this into our farmer trainings? So really focusing on, is there a way to make farmers feel empowered? How do we provide that kind of feedback so that they feel they have control and that they are going to have an impact not only on their farm but on water quality statewide? How can we make them feel that there is an economic benefit and then demonstrate to them that there's an economic benefit of writing and following a nutrient management plan? We know from all of us, right? Hands-on is the way in which people learn. Hands-on is the most impactful way to talk about education. So is there a way that we can work on and strategize on providing those in-field demos and trials together and providing that in-field education, maybe one-on-one in-field education for those folks who don't like to work in groups, as well as that group field day type educational intervention? So how do we provide folks that opportunity to engage with the information so that they feel comfortable and ready to write that nutrient management plan and, more importantly, implement that nutrient management plan? And last but not least, how do we get a positive message about nutrient management planning out there? I always laugh that as an educator, my job is mostly sales, right? How do I sell you on the information that I'm providing you? How do I make you feel excited about it and want to engage with the information I provide you? Same way with every time we talk with a farmer about conservation or talk to them about nutrient management plan. How do we provide that positive message? How do we provide a way for them to interact with that information so that they can pull it out in their own time? And that's what the online nutrient management planning training was all about, is accessing that information in bit by bit as we're ready to accept that information and learn that information, engage it on my own time and in my own way. So I know many of you, depending, are really active on social media. How do we provide that positive message consistently and in small bits over time to engage those folks into writing voluntary nutrient management plans? So that was about my 15 minutes, right? It's a rah kind of a presentation today, but I really think there's a lot of ways. As a scientist, I know I get really wrapped up in talking about the science, but in all reality, this is a social network, right? This is social. This is me trying to help another individual. So I need to think about that psychology and that behavior and the feelings behind writing a nutrient management plan. I know, not what you wanted to hear on a Monday morning, but really, how do I engage? How do I sell nutrient management plans out there on the landscape? And it's not just me, it's us. How do we work together as high impact individuals to get more nutrient management planning and to get above that 37.3% that we've achieved in 22? How do we get all the way to that 40%, that 50%, so on or so forth? So with that, I will wrap up. Like I said, if you have ideas, you have thoughts. So I provided the information today, and I know y'all have your phones. So you can chat with Cody or Andrea with DATCP, or any of us over in the nutrient management program, and we'll be happy to work with you to take your ideas to move nutrient management planning forward. So with that, I will stop sharing.
Thank you, Jamie.
You betcha. And hopefully Mike's ready to go.
I think I am. Andrea, can you hear me?
Beautifully.
Perfect. Awesome. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I have just one slide, some bullet points. Are you seeing these?
Yes, it looks great, and we can still hear you.
Awesome. Great. It also helps if I don't have this mute button on my headphone cord pressed.
No worries.
Sorry, but hi, everyone. Nice to meet all of you. I see we have 137 people on the call this morning. So awesome. I'm going to be kind of brief, but I've just put together a series of bullet points, which are just current items to talk about in an update meeting like this. My first bullet point, maybe folks probably know, but the national NRCS office released a new version of the 590 standard in late 2019. That national standard is something we looked at. We felt like our current 2015 standard meets all the criteria in that 2019 standard. So we have a continuing variance to continue to apply our 2015 590 standard. Our current 2015 standard is also very comprehensive. It's over 20 pages. So I will tell you, eventually, it will need to be updated. We won't be able to continue the variance forever. And if national stays on a 5-year timeline, we will probably see a new national standard sent down to states in late 2024, which means what we want to do is start the work to get the edit process going for our possible 2025 new Wisconsin 590 standard. So we'll start out with a template from the 2019. We'll look at any significant changes in late 24, and hopefully we can get on track to adopt a new standard in 2025. NRCS with major standards, we collaborate with Wisconsin Land and Water using the Standard Oversight Council process. We're currently doing that right now with 328 conservation crop rotation, and we will have a public draft posted up to the Standards Oversight Council website for public review this week. But that SOC process will take some time. I think my goal right now is to start discussing with Kate Brunner about establishing a SOC team, probably starting in late summer, early fall. And we think that that will take a 2-year process, likely. of going through our standard, making sure our criterion language are in there and associated guidance documents go with that. So that's kind of the itinerary, I think, is to start the process to revise it later this year, making it a 2-year process. That'll keep us on track. As Jamie mentioned too, we're looking at how do we get nutrient management in areas where we haven't traditionally had a lot of nutrient management in Wisconsin, and nutrient management on pasture lands and outwintering areas. These are outwintering areas, maybe large beef or heifer operations that are maybe putting bales out on pasture, things like that. And we're calling those outwinter areas. They have animals on them from maybe December, January, February. They're fed on outwintering areas. We've looked at SnapPlus. We've analyzed it. We figure out how much manure and urine are deposited on those outwintering pasture areas and put that grazing deposit of waste on that landscape and account for it in a nutrient management plan. So we're working on that. Adam Abels, the state grazing specialist, he and I will be talking about this more in upcoming months, how to write nutrient management plans for pasture lands. As we continue through with the development of version 3, which will be a few years out yet, of SnapPlus, we'll make sure that we make planning on pasture lands easy and straightforward. One effort on my second bullet point on the future planning efforts, but one thing we've been doing the last couple of years is meeting with the Cranberry Growers Association and talking about nutrient management with just a very specific crop of cranberries. We know this can be a pretty impactful crop in Wisconsin. It's over 20,000 acres of cranberry beds that are established. Working with those growers and cranberry experts at UW, it's a different ballgame for cranberry growers. They do very small amounts of nutrient applications. They rely heavily on foliar testing of nutrients in those plants, that perennial vine crop. And we've made some progress on that. We're actually seeing some pretty nice cranberry nutrient management plans. My third bullet point is NRCS has a financial collaborative agreement with UW soil staff. We began that almost 2 years ago with Dr. Carrie Lebowski. Just last year, Carrie went to Pennsylvania, so we're working with Francisco Arriaga now as our lead person to conceptualize and develop a nitrogen management tool for Wisconsin. This would be a conceptual tool right now that we would use to help planners decide end-loss pathways or end-loss risks in their nutrient management planning efforts as they're going through and writing their plans. We figured that it would utilize SnapPlus data such as field data, fertilizer rates and timing and methods, but then also it'd be something maybe you could toggle on or off if you were in a source water protection area or an area that has specific groundwater concerns or maybe elevated well nitrate levels, and we want to figure out a pathway to reduce that. It would give you signals in your planning process. It would give you messages, maybe think about this, or this pathway is present. So we're looking at that. We're looking at all the variables of it. Currently working with UW to hire a postdoc grad student to work on this with us for 3 or 4 years. And maybe we'll have a nitrogen management tool available for use in the next version of SnapPlus. It's a big goal of ours. So in funding, we fund nutrient management through NRCS programs. One specific one is EQIP. Nutrient management is considered a climate smart priority practice by national leadership because it does interact with losses to the atmosphere, nutrient losses to surface water, nutrient losses to groundwater. This practice is climate smart. So it gets higher ranking, higher attention, and higher funding levels as a climate smart practice. So encourage your clients to seek funding through EQIP or other NRCS programs. We continue to train and support technical service providers. And I know that some of you here today on the call are TSPs. You are independent agronomists, you work with a company, and you're registered technical service providers to write these plans for customers through the NRCS programs. So we continue to support that. We also continue to develop comprehensive nutrient management plans. Land treatment practices and nutrient management are part of CNMPs, and they're needed for applications for waste storage cost sharing projects. So usually what happens is the producer walks through the door and says, I have a design for a waste storage unit. NRCS says, well, in our ranking process, we need you to develop a CNMP. You'll rank quite a bit higher. And then that process begins. Farmer looks at the list of eligible TSPs and says, there's one that can write my CNMP for me. And it's usually a collaboration between an ag engineer and an agronomist to complete those comprehensive nutrient management plans. Okay, so a couple more bullet points. They're sort of adjacent to nutrient management here, the last few, but we have a new interim organic management standard. It's conservation practice. Right now it's an 823 is the number. And 823 is to help NRCS have a pathway to fund organic management planning in Wisconsin. And I think we're going to be adopting this relatively soon. Wisconsin has hired an organic conservation specialist in Western Wisconsin. His name is Thomas Manley. He works with us through a partnership funding agreement through his organization called Marble Seed. And we will be completing more nutrient management plans, just one practice, through the organic management. It requires nutrient management plans. It also requires tolerable soil loss. It requires pest management strategies too on organic farms. So I don't think they're going to look a lot different. Organic farms still use commercial fertilizers, other organic certified products. They still use manure. Organic farms still do tillage or reduced tillage systems. So I think nutrient management will look very similar on an organic farm versus any other conventional farm. But I think that'll help us move the path forward for increasing acres. All right, so everyone's interested in biochar. Been hearing a lot about it. Last couple of years, there's been an interim standard other states have adopted. This year, we will be looking deeper into possibly adopting 336 soil carbon amendment. Soil carbon amendments can be a lot of different things from woody products to wood chips. But the specific one I think might be a good fit for Wisconsin is the application of biochar products to Wisconsin soils. So this one's going to take a lot of state-specific guidance about biochar products and whether or not to add them to your soil or what type of nutrient or soil interactions will occur. So we're going to look at this very carefully, and if we adopt it, it'll have to have some very specific state guidance with it. So keep that one on your radar. And then the last one here, just developing guidance on manure injection systems and all the modernization of equipment that's been going on the last several years. I've been putting together low disturbance manure application injection guidance on that. And also very important, like the photo in my background, is when these low disturbance events occur, they have impacts for soil conservation. They may increase soil loss if they have higher levels of disturbance, so we're looking at that. But they also are very important for water quality, right? Getting manure in the soil, keeping the soil covered to prevent soil erosion, but also the integration of cover crops into that. It's very new and evolving technologies in manure management. So look for that from me in the upcoming year. And that's what I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. All right. We're going to switch gears here just a little bit. And we are going to talk about Best practices for nutrient management planning. So good morning, everybody. My name is Andrea Topper. I am the training and outreach conservation specialist with DATCP. A lot of my time is focused doing exactly what we're going to do here today. Outreach and education revolving around nutrient management planning, and then also the SnapPlus program, which we will dive into here in a little bit. So first and foremost, I wanted to kind of just ask, what does good nutrient management planning look like in SnapPlus? Well, I think it looks a little bit different for everybody, but some things that come to mind when I think of good nutrient management planning is working through our plan with doing annual updates. On top of that, making sure that we are planning out full rotations within our plan, making sure that we're having nutrient applications planned out into future years. And, we'll get into more of these specifics of why I think these are things that are important. But in the back of your mind, as we're working through this today, just think about, what does good nutrient management planning look like for you in SnapPlus? One thing I want to talk a little bit more about before we dive too far in is a nutrient management plan is a living document. It's ever changing. It's meant to be updated. It's meant to be tweaked, and it's a plan. First and foremost, it's a plan. Okay. And with plans can change. And so it's important to treat it like a plan, in the sense that if things change with either manure or fertilizer applications, we update that within the plan. If weather has caused us not to be able to plant corn and we ended up switching to soybeans, again, we need to update that within the plan. It's perfectly okay to go back and update plans, incorporate what actually has happened. And whether you do that, mid-season, or you're going back during your 2023 planning season and you're updating 2022 years then, whatever works best for you. But again, just don't get hung up on, I turned my nutrient management plan in and it said this, I have to do this. Again, it's a plan. So just think in your mind, it's a plan, things can change. All right, so talk a little bit more here about annual updates, and specifically for the 2023 planning season, what are some things that we should be doing when we're going through and updating our nutrient management plans? So first and foremost, we review our 2022 plan and our applications, and exactly what we just talked about, making sure that our information is up to date and it's matching what actually happened out on the landscape. Secondly, we want to go back through and update our soil samples. Again, it's required to have soil samples pulled once every 4 years, and we need one soil sample for every 5 acres. So making sure that when we pull new soil samples, we're getting those samples and we're re-uploading them into the SnapPlus program so that we can account for those new results. Additionally, throughout the years, rental agreements change, you're farming different pieces of land. We need to make sure that we're representing that within the Snap Maps feature of SnapPlus. So going in and updating our field boundaries. Do we need to remove a field? Do we need to add in a couple different fields? And then once we're doing that, again, making sure that we're documenting where our private wells are, documenting tile inlets and outlets, and all of those features that could add additional layers of restrictions when we're looking at manure and fertilizer applications. And then last but not least, we want to really dive in and start planning out our 2023 cropping season. So with that, as we're going through and planning out what crops we're going to be growing, we're also going to be allocating our manure applications. I have it written here. We're going to make sure that we're allocating our spring 2023 manure applications, as well as our fall 2023 manure applications. And what do I mean by that? And why do we need to make sure that we're doing 2 seasons of manure applications? Well, when we take a quick look at how SnapPlus works, we are thinking of, when we are planning by season. And so season goes from, let's do 2022. So in 2022, we planted our corn crop, and at the end of 2022, we harvested that crop. And then that fall, we went out and applied a manure application. So in fall of 2022, we applied manure. We have to think about, where are those nutrients going? What crop are we wanting to grow with that fall 2022 manure application? that fall 2022 manure application should be in our 2023 season, because those nutrients that we applied aren't going to grow our 2022 crop that we just harvested. Those nutrients are going to grow our next year, 2023 corn grain crop. Okay, and so when we look at the example here, in 2023, we had a spring application happening with manure. After that corn was harvested in 2023, they went out and they also put out some manure that fall, again, after that corn grain was harvested in 2023. That fall 2023 application needs to be found in our 2024 season. So you can see here that at the bottom, we have our dairy liquid application going out in the fall. And again, technically it's the fall of 23, but we need to make sure that we're placing it in the season of 2024, because that fall of 23 manure, those nutrients are going to grow our 2024 grain crop. It's kind of confusing, but I always think of it as, okay, I'm applying these nutrients. Which crop do I want to grow these nutrients with? And that always helps me kind of visualize where I need to be putting my applications within SnapPlus. So again, once we've gotten our manure applications allocated out on the landscape, then we're going to come back and we're going to meet that remaining crop need with our commercial fertilizer applications. And then on top of that, we want to make sure that our rotation settings are including the 2023 year. So when SnapPlus is running the calculations in the background, verifying compliance, it's doing that based on the set rotation that you have within the program. And so it's important to make sure that we're planning for the 2023 year, that all fields have a current validated 2023 year plan within it, and the rotation settings are set to include that 2023 year. I wanted to focus a little bit more about phosphorus applications and how SnapPlus is kind of running in the background and checking on phosphorus applications, and then also talking about the importance of having full rotations. So it is very, very important to build out farms' actual rotations into the plan. Additionally, it's just as important to make sure that we're allocating our manure throughout that entire rotation. So here we have a quick example of a field in Grant County. The rotation had manure planned out in the 2021 and 2022 years, but there was no applications after that 2022 period. And you can see here that there's 6 more years continued within this rotation. All right. So when you have 2021 and 2022 manure applications applied in this rotation, all applications met 590 guidelines. Our soil loss was at 2.6 tons per acre per year. Our P index was at a 4. But if you were to go in and start adding in manure applications into those future years, the soil loss increased to 2.9 tons per acre per year, and the P index was at a 7. Okay. And so right there, with those nutrient applications, it's failing the P index and the soil test P strategy. And I was trying to think of the easiest way to say this, but in my mind, by not fully planning out your manure applications throughout the rotation, you can run into compliance issues in the sense of things that you didn't necessarily know were going to hit you until they hit you. Whereas if you're working and you're planning out your full rotations and you're adding in your manure applications into the future, you're able to see well in advance when and if you would be running into a situation like this where you would be failing the phosphorus index. If that's the case, if you're planning in advance, those are things you can take into consideration and look at identifying different fields that you could be hauling your manure to, or timing your manure applications differently. So just different things that we can do to better help us plan out into the future and making sure that we aren't running into any red flags or compliance issues. So staying on that same phosphorus discussion, I wanted to talk a little bit more about how commercial phosphorus applications work within the SnapPlus program. And to do that, I wanted to go all the way back to the 590 standard, okay? And so in the 590 standard, it says that annual phosphorus and potassium nutrient recommendations may be combined into a single application that does not exceed the total nutrient recommendation for that rotation, okay? I'll show you a quick demo, but one other thing I wanted to touch on here quickly regarding the 590 standard is that Up to 20 pounds per acre of P2O5 starter fertilizer may be applied to corn grown on soils testing excessively high, where no other fertilizer was recommended. All right. And both of these things that are written into the 590 standard are built into SnapPlus. So let's take a look at how they work. All right. So here I wanted to quickly show you, I have a 3-year rotation on this field. We have 2 years of corn and a year of soybeans. The first year of corn has a nutrient need of phosphorus at 40 pounds. The second year of corn is 40 pounds. And then the soybeans are 25 pounds of phosphorus, okay? So over this 3-year period, we have 105 pounds of phosphorus that is able to be applied. You can see here in the 2022 year, I added 104 pounds of phosphorus in that first year. And I don't have a red cell, I don't have a red flag. That's because I stayed underneath that 105 pounds that is allowed within this 3-year set rotation. All right. But if I were to go in and add in some more phosphorus in that 2023 growing season, you can see I added in 46 pounds. I ran into an orange flag. All right. And that's because going back to our 590 standard, it says that we're allowed to put on a single application up to the rotation's need of phosphorus. So this 3-year rotation had a need of 105 pounds. I could put this up to 105 pounds and still be okay. But then again, when we're going and applying more nutrients that following year, we've already applied all the phosphorus that we're able to. So SnapPlus is going to tell us that we need to reduce or eliminate our commercial phosphorus application on this field. All right. So we can be a little confusing in how that works, but you are allowed to do a single application and kind of bank that phosphorus there. And then the program will look at the set rotation and take into consideration the total amount of phosphorus that is allowed within that rotation. So now to kind of dive back into that second bullet point where it talks about if you have excessively high soil test phosphorus levels, you're still allowed to put out corn starter. So I quickly wanted to show you how that works. So here I have my 23 pounds of my liquid, well, it's my liquid 721.7 going on at a 10-gallon rate. And that's giving me 23 pounds of phosphorus. And usually you're going to see this message pop up down in that guidance box in SnapPlus that says P2O5 applied as corn starter should be applied at planting and placed subsurface or in a band within close proximity to the seed. So to get the program to realize that my 721.7 was going on as a starter for my corn, I needed to choose the spread method to be a subsurface application. By checking that box as a subsurface application, this error message goes away because the program's able to identify that, oh, hey, this is that starter application of phosphorus. We're allowed to put out that 20 pounds. Therefore, this is okay. All right, so after we've gone through and finished our update on our plan and got all of our manure applications planned out and our commercial fertilizer applications planned out, we're going to go back into the reports tab and we're going to run the NM2 compliance check report to verify compliance. Okay, we're going to probably run into a couple different things. You could run into some simple issues in the sense of you documented that you do no-till, but you had an incorporated application of urea. You're going to have to go back there and change that incorporated application to an unincorporated application. Simple things like that, that all of a sudden slip through the cracks. And as you're going through and planning and might not catch right away, the program will catch. And then it reminds us, okay, let's go back and take a closer look at those things. The one thing I do want to mention here is that honesty is more important than a flag-free plan. I suggest that if there are red flags within the plan, reach out to the farmer that you're writing the plan for and let them know what you're running into. Let them know that you have some excessive soil loss on a couple fields, or that he or she is putting out too much nitrogen fertilizer. Have those discussions with the farmer. Let them know what you're looking at as a planner and talk to them about a couple of the different options that they might have to meet compliance within those areas, such as adding in some cover crops, reducing tillage. Maybe we're not going to do fall tillage, but we'll do a spring tillage event. All those different things are good conversations to have with the farmer, solely for the fact that the farmer can know what their options are. And then they have a little bit more say in the matter of, yes, I can reduce my tillage by removing, fall tillage, or I've been thinking about doing cover crops. Those 3 fields would be the perfect place to try them out on. Kind of giving them a little bit more say in the matter will also help with the implementation of the plan. The last thing I want to say about this is that county land conservation staff are willing to work with you and the farmers to fix those red flags. Whether they have some suggestions on how you can go out there and, get rid of some of that excessive soil loss, or whether you want to talk about looking at implementing cover crops. There can also be some cost share incentives out there available for some of those different things. And so reaching out to your county land conservation staff is a great first step to figure out, is there some monetary help out there if I want to look at switching up some of my practices? Last but not least, let's touch on the 590 checklist. SnapPlus is awesome. I'll say it again, SnapPlus is awesome. It fills out the checklist for us mostly. There are some things within the checklist that the program just can't identify. So it's our job as nutrient management planners to go through and read that checklist and make sure that all of the boxes are filled, whether it's a yes, no, or an NA. And going through and validating, are these things correct? Did I meet this requirement? It says no. Is there something that I can do before I turn this plan in to, fix that? No to a yes. Last but not least, we got to sign that checklist. As the planner, we sign it, but then also the farmer needs to sign it. The farmer is signing it, saying that they understand it, that they've reviewed it, and that they're going to be able to implement it. And then I always want to mention that electronic signatures are allowed. I get questions about that quite frequently. So what do farmers need to implement a nutrient management plan? I think it's going to look a little bit different for every operation, but kind of the bare minimums in my mind are an understanding of the plan, rates and timings of manure and fertilizer applications. Have you grouped fields together where they have different fertility management based on the soil tests? Those are good things to talk about with the farmer. Maps, making sure that they know, as the farmer who might be applying manure themselves or hiring a manure hauler, to know where they can spread and where not to spread and what the rates are at which we are spreading the manure. An understanding of restricted soil types and, where are those restrictions and what do those restrictions mean? And then knowledge of any new practices that are implemented within the plan. So are we looking at doing some no-till, or are we looking at doing some cover crops on a couple fields? Just making sure that the farmer has an understanding of what those programs are, or those requirements are. All right, let's switch gears here yet again. Let's talk a little bit about making useful spreading maps and snap maps. The SnapPlus team and I have met with Kevin Erb and some commercial manure haulers from different parts of the state to have conversations about, what do you guys need on maps? What do good maps look like to you guys? And how can we get the maps to be helpful for you? Well, the overwhelming response was that they want to see areas of where they can spread and areas that they can't spread. So basically they want go or no go maps. And so I'll quickly show you that we can make maps that look more like the right-hand side here, where we have that red and black checkered showing us that those are areas in which we should not be spreading manure. And then the other parts of the field are able to receive manure. So planners may need the layers to appropriately plan rates and timings and methods of nutrient applications. But once that manure hauler is out in the field and they're going to be applying at a specified rate, the only layers that outline the field and indicate where you can't spread are useful to the haulers. In this case, it's going to be the uncropped areas, waterways, and a nutrient prohibition area around the well. It's a tiny little red dot there down at the bottom. And as a planner using Snap Maps, you're able to make maps like this one here on the right by just turning off layers that don't actually prohibit manure application. So as a manure hauler who's going out into these fields, this left map can be pretty overwhelming, seeing all these different layers and not knowing necessarily what they mean and how to read them. Whereas if you have a map that's a little bit simpler, showing where the areas in which you're not allowed to apply manure specifically, it makes it a little bit easier for them as they're driving across those fields. Most non-permitted farms, so our 590 farms, don't have many areas where there's manure prohibition in this growing season, but we do have manure prohibitions for winter spreading. So if winter spreading is planned, there are ways to make a simple map for the hauler that doesn't require interpretation other than spread and don't spread. So when you're in SnapMaps, you're going to look for the Update Winter Manure Prohibited Areas button in the legend, and you're going to click it. This is important because it causes Snap to do the calculations that to define the winter manure areas. Then after that, you're going to go to the menu bar at the top on SnapMaps there, and you're going to click on PDF creation, and you're going to click Create PDF of Winter Manure Prohibited Areas Map. That then will make you a map that looks like this image here on the right, showing you those go and no-go areas for winter spreading. I also wanted to share with you guys some exciting news that the SnapPlus team has developed a manure tracking app called Smart. It has simple maps for haulers while you're out in the field and hauling. This was also developed with funding from the Dairy Innovation Hub. So first and foremost, how do you access the app? I will be honest, if you type in Smart in the Google Play Store or the App Store, it's going to be very, very difficult to find. I currently have not been able to find it myself without going to the SnapMaps page, clicking on the Smart button here, and then clicking on Smart homepage. Once you click on that, that's going to bring up the homepage that the SnapPlus team has developed, and there's going to be links for the Apple Store as well as the Google Play Store, and those links will bring you directly to the app. Additionally, to use the app, you have to identify what the specific farm ID and name is. Once you get the app, you're going to enter in the farm name and that ID name that you find in SnapMaps. Then that allows you to download in those field restrictions from SnapMaps so that you're actually able to see that farm's fields that you're going to be spreading manure on. And then it is important to click Update Spreadable and Winter Acres at any point in which you are changing anything in SnapMaps so that the program knows that, hey, there's new updates. We need to send those new updates and account for them within the Smart app as well. So here is showing, what that farm ID looks like and the farm name, and then how you enter that into the app itself. For regular farms, there's going to be two map types. You're going to have the no manure area and the winter no manure maps. For permitted farms, there are three map types. It's going to be the surface, so 100-foot waterway buffers, incorporated or injected, the 25-foot waterway buffers, and then a winter map. You'll choose, which type of map you want to see. And then you're able to come in and identify what kind of manure you're going to be hauling. Is it a liquid or a solid? And then you can identify the load size if you know it. Otherwise, you can go to the map and then it's going to show you a map of spread, don't spread areas. All right. And then there is a little blue dot that shows where your location is. And if your location crosses a red boundary at any point in time, so a no spread zone, the app will turn red and the phone will also vibrate, telling you that you have crossed into a no spread area. If you use the tracking features, it will actually track your trail. When you've clicked stop or save, it'll turn that trail to be green. Additionally, when you're done, if you would be interested, you would be able to upload that record of that manure application back into SnapMaps, and then you can actually see Laura was doing some manure spreading in her neighborhood. Shh, don't tell anyone. I'm just kidding. But this is her green trail that she went and she spread her manure on. And now, since she's uploaded that into SnapMaps, she would be able to pull that back into her records tab and have record of all of these different separate manure applications. Okay, so to get into some different tips and tricks these are just different things that I've had support questions come through and things that I think are fun, neat features that might not everybody know that they exist. So the first thing I wanted to touch on is adding no manure areas to the maps. So for this, you're able to go and click, you're in SnapMaps, you click on drawing tools, draw a feature, and then down at the bottom, we have all these manure prohibited area features that we can click on. Depending on which one you click is going to be, the different buffer that you're going to put out. But once you select, manure prohibited area, you're able to identify, do you want it to be a line string or a polygon? How far in feet do we want this buffer to go? And when do we want this buffer to be present? All seasons or just in the winter? And then you're going to go through, and let's say we are doing a line string. We're going to map out along this edge of this field by clicking along the boundary. And then once you're done clicking, you double click, and then that's going to bring in that 100-foot buffer around that line that you listed. And then that restriction will then be brought into the SnapPlus program when you download and import the SnapMaps information. Additionally, in SnapMaps, you're actually able to add acreage to field as a field label. So you can have the field name and then the acreage listed right below that. When you open up SnapMaps, it's always going to open up to that SnapMap legend for you. But if you go to the right and click on field properties and then click on field labels, you're able to come in here and choose between two different variables to have listed on the maps. So you can choose, SnapMap field acres, you can choose soil test P levels. And then, once you select what you want, you can come in here and you'll see that we have field name C, 54.1 acres. So it's just a nice little resource that you can add onto your maps, and it can help you through your planning process. Last but not least here, I just want to mention that the SnapPlus team has done a wonderful job putting together step-by-step tutorial videos. If at any point in time you have questions about how to do something, or you forgot how to do something, there's probably a video out there for that. I highly suggest going and navigating through their YouTube channel. All of those videos can be found on their YouTube channel, and they're nice and short little clips to help remind you of what you need to be doing. So I will quickly stop here. I have the CEU QR code up on the screen. Please feel free to scan that now. And if you are unable to scan it, if you would enter your name and CCA number in the chat, we will make sure to record that accordingly. And no worries if you guys can't get the QR code now, we will show it again here soon. All right, I'm going to stop sharing now. I'll turn it over to Dan Marzu. And again, I will show the CEU code again at the end.
All right, thank you, Andrea. Let me. And how does this look, Andrea?
Beautiful.
Excellent. All right. So like Andreas mentioned, and for those that don't know me quite yet, my name is, whoa, what happened there? That was kind of funky. My name is Dan Marzu. I am the North Central Region Outreach Specialist with the NPM team. So let's go on. I'm going to talk about how to change the field name when you import a soil test. So you import your soil test. Everybody knows we go into this little button right here, and we click on Import Soil Test. We take that CSV file that we want to import into SnapPlus, and we click Open. So right here, you could see again here. Let me see here. The soil test says pasture. I kind of cut it off here, and the field I created, it says east. So these don't match up. So everybody knows if you import this, or most of you know, I shouldn't say everybody knows. If you import a field name that isn't the exact same as what you have in SnapPlus, it'll create a new field. So instead of hitting close like we usually do with this new fields detected, actually save to file, I want to say save to file, we actually click on this close button. That's important. So what it basically does is brings up this, allows us to change the name. So I actually changed this to East Pasture. I kind of cut it off. Where it's at, and then this little button goes change all E pasture to East Pasture. You want to click OK, and it'll actually do this automatically for us. And then we click OK here. You know, let's see here, 1 new test and 3 new samples. Click OK, and we import it all the way into SnapPlus, and we get all of this information here. So that's basically a very simple way of doing it. Instead of going through the CSV file, changing all those names in there and resaving it and all that, you can do that in here. It's just very important to hit that close button when you're importing. If you're going to change those names, to hit that close button in order to get those changed. Now, Mike actually, I don't know if he was aware of this, but he actually gave me a good little intro into what we need to do for pastures in SnapPlus. So basically, when you need to include pastures into your nutrient management plan, if it receives any mechanical applications of any nutrient, it is stocked at an average of more than 1 animal unit per acre, and I'll show you a neat little trick on how to figure that out. It has a herd present in winter and is not a feedlot. And if you're going to include these, you have to use soil test, or there are assumed soil test values that you can use. Of course, it is always best to use a soil test to determine actually what's out in the field. But if you want to, and they don't have a soil test available at that time, you can use 150 parts per million of phosphorus and 6% organic matter. But again, I highly suggest getting that soil test taken. So when you're on the nutrients page, we can start doing our grazing plan. So just like if you're going to add any type of manure in there, you want to click on this little blue, green plus sign. And then you can choose any type of grazing. So here we got beef grazing, there's goat grazing, sheep grazing. I guess chickens and turkeys and poultry all get kind of crazy when we're trying to work with this. But you know, it has pretty much every type of grazing species that you want to put in there. So we chose beef grazing. This includes all the book values. So if you have gone to any of the workshops, you know, we have these little different types of book values for manure deposits. What we want to do is we were on that nutrient sources tab. We want to jump over to this grazing herd setup. We want to put this add herd, and there's this little let's see here. Yeah, add herd. So then we choose a name of what that herd name is. So say it's a cow calf pair grazing. You could have dairy cattle, you know, any type of pasture herd name. You want to choose that animal group. Okay, then we hit accept. So up here it has our herd name, cow calf beef, and then we can go down here. What does it do? Okay, back previous. We pick on the click on this little green plus sign again, and then that adds in our animal type. So with this, we have calves, high energy, which is if you're feeding any type of grain to your animals, that's a high energy. High forage is strictly all your grass-fed type animals, beef cows and bulls. So, you know, this has a range, so you want to choose the best representation of what your animals are throughout that year. Yeah, our calves do not stay 450 pounds per that whole year, but you know, you kind of put them in there just so we know we have that manure credited. So in there, we see, I chose my calves, my cows. I have 10 of each. So this is something that you input, and this is all calculated for you. So it has a daily manure production of 26 pounds. We have 10 of them, so we have 260 pounds of manure applied per day. Same thing with our cows. We have 63 pounds per animal per day. So over the 10, we have 630 pounds of animal manure from those 10 animals. To get these numbers down here, we hit calculate, and we got 0.45 tons per day and 20 animal units. Which is all fine, but we want to know exactly how much we apply to a particular pasture. So there's this little grazing, oops, here, back, previous, little grazing estimator, and did that not work? Oh yeah, I want to go back here, okay. So with this, the manure production per day, so this 0.45, there's this known volume. Now, if you're working with a manure pit or something, you know that it holds, 1.9 million gallons or whatever it has. Here we have to do a little bit of calculating. So this known volume, what we take is this 0.45 tons per day, multiplied by 365 days, or how long you actually have those animals out on pasture. And say I got these animals all year long, they're going to be out somewhere on my pasture for the whole year. We get approximately 165 tons. So we put this 165 in that known value there. Now getting back to this, if we want to know how much we're actually applying to a particular pasture, we want to click on this little grazing estimator, and this little screen pops up, so we could choose what herd name. If you have multiple herds that go through the pasture, so say you got some cow calves in one pasture and then you got steers in another pasture, you have to have two different herds, and you can to calculate how much manure you apply. So you hit the cow calf, you input the number of acres you have in that particular pasture. Here I just put in 10, 180 days in pasture. They spend 100% time on that pasture, and you hit this refresh and we get 8 tons per acre applied. And here is that animal unit. So 1.5 animal units in that 10-acre field. So yes, we do need a nutrient management plan for this particular herd. This is also located in your, when you're doing in your cropping. So just like when you're applying any type of nutrient in your cropping screen, you click on one of these cells in this, one of these 6 cells, and it pops up this. That grazing estimator is here also. So we can choose whatever herd we have here. It's already calculated that it has a 0.45 tons per acre. This 12.5 acres comes from our field size, so this 12.5. I'm going to graze them 180 days, that same 100% of the time, and we get 6.4 tons of manure applied during that grazing season to that 12 acres, a little over 12 acres in that pasture. Again, it also calculates your animal units for the 12.5, so you got 1.2. So yes, we do need a nutrient management plan for this, and we click refresh. Yeah, we click refresh to get those numbers, and we can put that number there. We hit apply and close, and it puts it back into our cropping screen. So there's my contact information. I know I kind of throw a lot of stuff at you really, really quick. I had a big cup of coffee, so I probably talked really fast. So, so if we have a little bit of time afterwards, I can feel free to slow it down a little bit and show you a little bit more. And I'll pass it on to Dan Smith, and he has all kinds of other stuff to show you.
Thanks, Dan. I will go ahead and bring up my slides. Dan, are they in full screen mode now? How about now?
Yep, now they are.
All right, perfect. And then Andrea, how much time do I have left?
You have at least 20 minutes, and then we will still have time for questions at the end.
Perfect. Well, we're going to be covering in this last presentation today, advanced nitrogen management settings in SnapPlus. So we're going to go ahead and start off with looking at tile drain fields. So this very first slide is showing the field screen in SnapPlus, and there's a lot of information on the screen, but if we look at the very far right-hand side, there's a check mark next to a drained field. And that check mark indicates that this field is drained either by tile drainage or even a man-made drainage ditch in that field. So we need to be thinking about this because it changes our nitrogen management strategy and it changes our soil classification for yield in some circumstances. Not every circumstance will be impacted by this, but there is cases where this is true. So tile drain fields changes the soil yield classification in some cases. This information is on page 15 through 29 of University of Wisconsin publication A2809, but there's a lot of different classifications for all the soil types in Wisconsin. So we're looking at the drainage classification and the soil yield potential as indicated there as soil yield potential YP. Our soil yield potential groups include H indicating high, M indicating medium, and S indicating medium, or indicating sandy. This would only be applicable for medium classification soils that are poorly drained or somewhat poorly drained or very poorly drained. So there's more language in A2809, but this will help us move to that higher classification. But what does that actually mean? Well, that actually means if we move from a medium yield potential soil that has poorly drained soils to a high yield potential soil, that changes the total amount of nitrogen that we're allowed to apply to that field because we're recognizing that that soil is capable of producing a better crop and should be using a nitrogen management strategy that makes sense. We also should be thinking about some other metrics here when we're choosing our nitrogen rate, such as if we're no-tilling, if we're incorporating cover crops, if we are growing corn and soybeans in rotation versus continuous corn. So this is only one piece to that nitrogen rate puzzle, but it is an important piece. So again, that check mark changes in some cases from medium yield potential soils to high yield potential soils. What does that actually mean though? Our nitrogen rate is based on MRTN or Martin, and that is an important setting in SnapPlus that we can change. So we have moved from the field settings now into the cropping settings to actually change nitrogen rate, and we're going to calculate out how we change this nitrogen rate. The MRTN setting there is next to that red star, and the default setting can be either 0.05. Sometimes we see the default set at 0.1, and that's going to vary depending on the year. The default setting is not going to depend on the year. That's going to depend on how SnapPlus was set up. But we can change this in our plans to be very accurate. For silage corn, if we look back at the chart on the previous slide, for silage corn, we're always going to use this 0.05 ratio because we recognize that nitrogen is going to increase the biomass of that silage corn. We're going to stick with that higher end. If we're no-tilling, we're also allowed to go up to this very high end. So that could be drastically different than corn grain, because in corn grain, as we're going to chat through on the next slide, is going to be down here at 150 or so for this next year. So how do we change this? Well, we double click where that red star was, and that opens up this box here. And this is our MRTN settings. And this is actually allows us to calculate out our MRTN rate. So for corn silage, I did calculate out a rate based on 35-cent nitrogen and $3.75 corn. This is not realistic for this year, but to show you how much this changes, that was calculated out at 0.09. However, our UW recommendation rate is 190. That is because that's in silage corn. Now, if we move to a grain corn, we're going to need to calculate this out. Today's dollars are going to say 83 cents a pound for nitrogen on average, $6.14 per bushel corn on average. That equals a 0.14 price ratio. So our recommendation now is going to drop down to 150. Our MRTN price ratio is going to be at 0.15. So you can see some colorful charts that the Nutrient Pest Management Program has published. Also, Fast Facts has this information in it. That's going to be the 0.15 column is where we're going to be operating for this year. We can change that in SnapPlus because we should to best use the program to plan for our nitrogen applications, we want this information to be the most accurate. We can double click on this and we can change that price ratio by using this drop down here. And then we simply hit accept, and that will change that setting within SnapPlus. So that covers nitrogen applications, but we also have legume crediting. So legume crediting is fairly well spelled out again in A2809 on page 79. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on the specifics, but I do want to have you pay attention here to a couple things. This chart first has medium fine textured soils and sandy soils. We have a significantly different credit because we recognize that sandy soils are not retaining that nitrogen nearly as well as our medium and fine textured soil. We also have less than and greater than 8 inches of regrowth here. So when we have greater than 8 inches of regrowth with a really good stand of alfalfa, we have 190 pounds of nitrogen out there in the landscape. Last year, that would have been worth $190. So that's pretty significant to think about. So we want to be using these credits wisely, and SnapPlus allows us to edit these credits when we see fit. So we should be doing some infield evaluation to verify that. And that credit drops all the way down to 90 and 40, depending on what type of soils you're on when you have a very poor stand of alfalfa. So to get this data, you are going to have to go out in the field or be very familiar with what your alfalfa stands look like going into the planting season to see if you have 1.5 plants, less than 1.5 plants, or greater than 4 plants per foot. So a little bit of evaluation. We also have this data for red clover and vetch. That's not a SnapPlus setting that we're going to be talking about, but it is 80% of alfalfa credits for red clover and berseem or bird's foot trefoil. And then vetch has that credit as well. We can chat through that a little bit more. Then we have a second year credit. And the second year credit is when we check the box on the very first screen in SnapPlus, on the home screen, the farm screen, and we say we want to use second year credits. That's going to apply this second year alfalfa credit. Highly recommend, because again, this is $50 per acre using $1 a pound for nitrogen. So that's significant when we think about that adding up over a few hundred to a few thousand acres. So how do we actually do this? We need to adjust our legume credits in SnapPlus by going in and double clicking on this white box here that says 190. And this says 190 because we have had 2 years of an alfalfa stand, and then we decided that, hey, that stand wasn't that great. We need to go in and we need to renovate that field and put in corn grain to utilize that credit. But we also know that alfalfa was really poor. It never really took off. It got frosted off a couple times. And then finally, this last winter really did it in. So we need to adjust that legume credit. We feel that our plant density was never at greater than 4 plants per foot. So what do? So we double click on that box. We double click here on this white box, and that opens up this screen. And I have 2 different scenarios laid out for you. This first scenario is assuming that we have a good stand with more than 8 inches of regrowth, and that gives us a 190 pound credit. We can accept that and we can move on. However, we went out to the field last fall and we realized that we needed to switch this field to corn because for whatever reason, we had less than 1.5 plants per square foot of alfalfa out in the field. And we mowed it last fall to get the most forage because we realized that we were going to renovate that field. So we're left with a 90 pound credit moving forward. So we can go ahead and accept that as well. And that changes things then on the cropping screen to a 90 pound credit. That also changes how much nitrogen we need to apply. If you'll notice, I was getting a flag. That was because I had a full commercial nitrogen program in here along with that high nitrogen credit. I simply changed that nitrogen credit and I removed that flag because I was using a fairly conservative nitrogen application program anyways. And I'm left with -3 for a total nitrogen to be applied on that field. So with that, I'd welcome questions and comments about advanced nitrogen management and SnapPlus and the settings to think about as we move forward, and turn it back on over to Andrea.